God could have made a perfect world. Why didn't he do it? And why, there are these stories of, Satan or in Islamic terms, Muslim terms, Iblis comes and says, give me, I know I'm headed for hellfire, but give me time to screw up your beautiful creation and seduce man and, before you exact final judgment on me. And God or Allah always says, yes, okay, you got time.
Keep watching to learn more. You can now download all 9 copies of the New Thinking Aloud magazine for free or order beautiful printed copies. Go to newthinkingaloud.org. New Thinking Aloud is presented by the California Institute for Human Science, a fully accredited university offering distant learning graduate degrees that focus on mind, body, and spirit. The topics that we cover here. We are particularly excited to announce new degrees emphasizing parapsychology and the paranormal. Visit their website at cihs.edu.
Book 4 in the New Thinking Aloud dialogue series is Charles T. Tart, 70 Years of Exploring Consciousness and Parapsychology, now available on Amazon.
Thinking Aloud. Conversations on the leading edge of knowledge and discovery with psychologist Jeffrey Mishlove.
Hello and welcome. I'm Jeffrey Mishlove. I cannot think of anything that troubles me more personally and probably troubles other people more personally than the phenomenon of war. That's why I feel very blessed today to be able to share with you and to be with myself, my friend Charles Upton, to hear his reflections. Charles was regarded as the youngest member of the Beat generation of poets back in the 1960s when his first 2 books of poetry were published by Lawrence Ferlinghetti of City Lights Books in San Francisco. He's subsequently become a philosopher associated with the traditionalist school of metaphysics, and he's also a practicing Sufi. I would think it's probably accurate to call him a Sufi mystic. He is the author of many books, including Folk Metaphysics, Mystical Meanings in Traditional Folk Songs and Spirituals, Knowings in the Arts of Metaphysics, Cosmology, and the Spiritual Path, The Science of the Greater Jihad, Essays in Principial Psychology, The System of the Antichrist, Truth and Falsehood in Postmodernism and the New Age, Vectors of the Counter-Initiation, the Course and Destiny of Inverted Spirituality, The Alien Disclosure Deception, The Metaphysics of Social Engineering, and most recently an autobiography called Giving Myself Away, From Beat Generation Protege to Metaphysical Social Critic, a cultural history of America through 50 years of spiritual seeking. Charles lives in Lexington, Kentucky, and now I'll switch over to the interview video. Welcome, Charles. It is a pleasure once again to be with you, although I know we're going to be focusing in on a very difficult topic, certainly difficult for me as a pacifist, but I imagine difficult for everyone as well.
Well, these are difficult times, whether the conflict shows itself, obviously on the world stage or whether it's just happening inside the soul. It's all the same conflict.
Let's begin with the poem that was the introduction to your meditations in time of war.
Now, this is written as if in the voice of Allah, as if in the voice of God, which every once in a while I do. Some people say, oh, only prophets can do that. Well, it's as if in the voice, And because there's always something you hear from time to time in your psyche that is greater than you. So this is called the ultimate blackness. Until you do my will, I will oppress you. You think you're being oppressed by the world and its disasters, but this is not so. You imagine standing up to the world, changing the world to escape from its relentless contraction and abasement, but there is no escape in defiance, no escape from me. Next, you imagine capitulating to the world and allowing it to destroy you. Because who can stand in the face of those omnipotent disasters, that relentless sabotage and cunning? But there is no escape in capitulation either, no escape from me in sacrificing yourself to the world you think you see. Lastly, you imagine your own self to be the oppressor, and so dream of standing up to it and transforming it, of capitulating to it and being destroyed by it. And yet there's no escape for me in this either, because who but your own supremely oppressive self could dream such dreams? No. Until you do my will alone, my oppression will never lift. And what is that will? It is obedience in contraction, obedience in abasement, obedience in annihilation. It is renunciation of expectation, sacrifice of all imagined outcomes, the end of the cherished illusion of the self-determined self, of the one chosen and instructed and empowered by God, the one who can turn even heroic obedience into the mask of rebellion. Not that, not any that is your Lord, but I alone. I am there in the blackness, in the black night of time, in that chamber where the lines of your silhouette and the motion of your hand appear nowhere at all. Is there power somewhere in that ultimate weakness? Is there healing in that sickness? Is there liberation in that cell of solitary confinement? Is there mercy in that dark night of the soul? Really? Is this the question you would address to me at the ultimate threshold? Do you really expect me to show you the outcome before the fact, slip you a clue, grant you a premature glance into the secret, a hint of the true answers that were written down before the world was made, a glimpse of the final score? Never. I will never do that, because I am an honest teacher and an impartial grader of tests. Until you step into the final night, you will never know. How can knowledge walk free of the exhaustion of its endless translators and commentators and petitioners and betrayers until no one remains to claim it? I can give you no answer to the question you ask, because you are that question. The only way you can ask it is to step beyond the threshold.
That was masterful. I so much appreciated, and it leads us into another comment that you made about war in a different essay, which is, if I can paraphrase it correctly, the only purpose of war at all is to enable us to appreciate that we can experience the divine in the midst of horrible suffering.
Yeah, in the midst of suffering, in the midst of war. Yeah, I mean, this world is a world of conflict because it's a world of choice. Everyone said, well, why didn't, God could have made a perfect world. Why didn't he do it? And why there are these stories of, Satan or in Islamic terms, Muslim terms, Iblis comes and says, give me, I know I'm headed for hellfire, but give me time to screw up your beautiful creation and seduce man and, before you exact final judgment on me. And God or Allah always says, yes, okay, you got time. And, because this is a world of choice, and to the degree that we can turn to the light in the midst of darkness, we have done something that cannot be done when all is light. When all is light, what is to be done? Nothing is to be done. Everything is perfect. Everything, even though the perfection deepens and deepens and deepens, it's still, how can you improve upon perfection? How? Only through imperfection. That's the mystery. That's why we're sent to this world, or decided to go to this world, which before birth, being sent to this world and deciding to go to this world were exactly the same thing. So we came here, and this is a world of choice, and so there needs be evil. As Jesus said, there needs be evil, but woe to him through whom evil comes. There needs be evil is not an excuse. It's just, that's the score. That's where we are, because this is a world of choice. So, and, what I'm choosing is, the world situation now is such that who knows who's right? We could just say, if there were only no Trump, then everything would be. No, it wouldn't. The world would go to hell by a different route. That's all. I mean, obviously, everything is extreme. The idea is the thing to do is to go to the extreme, find your extreme or the next extreme and go farther and farther and farther, whatever. Elon Musk now doesn't just want to go to Mars. He wants to leave the solar system forever, completely, and go to other stars in the galaxy. Well, great. Let him do it, as long as he never comes back. That would be, improvement. But I mean, it's all absurd excess, because the idea of going to the center instead of the edge, we're pushing the edge, push the edge, push the edge. What about going to the center? The edge is getting farther and farther away from the center of things. Go to the center. The center looks, boring. You're a mere moderate if you go to the center. No, the center is the source of everything, source of all the reality and all the power and all the love that there is. But we forget what that center is. What that center is in this world for us is the human form. And we're bored with the human form. We don't quite trust it. We want to be something else, anything else. So what's happening, you want to talk about apocalypse? Everything is coming out. The Epstein files, everything is coming out, and there's plenty of things that haven't come out and won't come out. But, there's an endless, this could, take us till the end of the eon, just going through 3 million pages of scandal and horror, and the idea that the UFO files are now being released, whatever that means, whether that's going to happen, whatever that is, nothing is hidden, because everybody now is being forced to live out their idolatries. Anybody who has an idol still, anybody who holds on to something other than the truth, other than God, is, okay, that's what you believe in, then go for it. Live out all the consequences of that idol. Do the whole thing. And everybody is doing the whole thing, whatever their belief is, whatever they're holding on to. They will go as far as they can beyond all bounds in service to that idol, because the idols have to be exhausted, and they're being exhausted, and that's how they fall. They're just used up. You used up all that idolatry, and now there's nothing left. So this is what everybody seems to be doing in the world now.
You describe in one of your essays reaching a point where you're filled with hatred and contempt for humanity itself for what we're doing.
You feel that, but then guess who you are? You're part of that humanity. How can you have hatred for humanity in the sense that you are superior to it? And self-hatred isn't going to do any good either, because it's like anybody who's struggling with a vice should know that guilt is what keeps you doing the thing you're guilty for. If you think there's no forgiveness, if you think there's no way out of the guilt, then, you went on a terrible bender the night before, you wake up with a terrible hangover and you say, I'll never do it again. But how do I get out of this horrible sense of guilt? Well, take a drink. Now it's all okay, So, contempt, well, what we need to do is realize what humanity really is. Humanity is a very exalted station, but it's an exalted station that's only reached through the most radical humility.
One of the things you point out is that the human is considered in Islam to be a superior being to the jinns.
Well, to the angels, even. As well, because, that's the story I keep telling, recounting from the Quran. The story goes, Allah creates Adam in the higher world before he's brought down to terrestrial reality, and he brings Adam before the angel. First, he tells Adam the names of all things, and then he brings Adam before the angels, and he asks the angels, well, do you know the names of all things? Tell us if you know it. And they said, well, we don't know because you didn't tell us. And then he says to Adam, well, you tell them. But what he says is tell them their names. Now, maybe I'm not understanding the Arabic, but in a number of translations, it seems as if he's asking Adam, commanding Adam to tell the angels their own names, which they don't even know. Which is interesting because this makes the angels, understandably, in metaphysical terms, like the prototypes of all things. They are the names of all things, but they do not know their names because only Adam encompasses all the names of all things in Allah's creation, which are also all the names of Allah, and that's what we're composed of, although on a much lower level than Allah or the angels, but yet in a more complete way. So. He says to the angels, bow down to Adam because he knows what you don't know. And they all do it except Iblis, who is the Muslim Satan. And it says Iblis was the angel who didn't bow down. So he was described as an angel, but it also later says, and he was of the jinn. So we don't know whether, because the angels and the jinn are very distinct in Islam. The angels, cannot sin, any more than a ray of light can be cut off from the sun and still remain a ray of light. They're just expressions of God. Whereas the jinn, like us, have free will. So you don't know whether he was always a jinn who was admitted to the company of the angels, or whether he was demoted to the station of a jinn through his transgression, because he said, far be it from me to bow down to Adam, a being made of earth and mud, whereas I am made of smokeless flame. Forget it.
Let's focus on the human form. You conclude your essays by saying, if only we could be more self-confident in our own humanity.
We don't have a clear distinction in our minds between dignity and self-respect on the one hand and vanity on the other. We think, well, talking about human dignity is simply egotistical. We're nothing but, tiny microbes crawling upon a speck of dust in endless space. We're nothing much. It's funny, the people who say we're nothing much in that way tend to be those who believe in scientism, and they were the ones at the same time that you know, are aspiring to give humanity titanic powers to do, you know, impossible and unheard of and very destructive things. So that isn't really humility, you know. In Islam, humanity, the human form is both Khalifa and Abd. Abd is slave. We're slaves of Allah. Just like everything is a slave. Nothing happens outside of the will of Allah. Everything is a slave to Him. But you're either a slave willingly or unwillingly. You know, and to be Abd is to be a slave willingly. But if we can perfect that, then immediately or in the same breath, we become Khalifa, which is Allah's representative on earth. Because only if we're completely empty of any tendency to rival God can the full power of God be manifest through us. So that's how that happens. And if we don't know what self-respect and human dignity are. We forgot. We forgot what they are. And so, you know, we can people want to be animals. People want to be robots. People want to be anything but a human being because we forgot what a human being is. You know, the Ramayana is possibly the earliest poem ever written down. You know, we don't know, but it's you know, it's one of the two great Indian epics. And it says something like this. See if I can remember it. You know, in the first age, man crossed the ocean of existence by his spirit alone. In the next age, you know, ritual and sacrifice began. And this is when Rama lived, one of the avatars of God, you know, of Vishnu, you know, the preserver aspect of God. And in this age, Rama lived, and by offering our every act to him, men lived well their ways. Now, you know, when everything is destroyed, basically, what is there to do but worship Rama's feet? You know, and he says, we have gone from the spiritual to the passionate. Next will come ignorance, universal war. You know, but listen to me when I say the last age of the world will be best, because in that age all action is useless. You know, nothing can possibly succeed except to say Rama. You know, it says the future will read this. Therefore, I tell them, when all's in ruin about you, just say Rama. It said, say Rama and win. Your time cannot touch you. So this is a certain thing of being reduced to God. You know, human hopes, human plans are all coming to naught. And we're seeing it because the great human plans that people have been brewing for years are now coming out and being manifested. You know, this is what Trump wants to do. This is what the Iranians want to do. This is what Israel want to do. The plans are finally being fulfilled. And look what's going to happen. Look what is happening, you know. So, the very futility of action of that kind reduces us to God. You know, and to say Rama is just like, you know, the Sufis say Allah. It's the same name of the same reality, and that's the ultimate response.
Rama in the Hindu tradition is very different from Allah, to my knowledge. As you pointed out, Rama is an avatar of the god Vishnu, and if I recall the Ramayana correctly, his partner Sita is stolen by a demon.
Yeah, Ravana. Yeah, and he goes to Rama is the great queller of demons. Okay, Rama. The avatars of Vishnu are better compared to Christ. Christ, a human figure who had a real historical role and accomplished this or that and founded, this form of worship and this and this. But still, when people, when Eastern Orthodox Christians say do the Jesus prayer, they're referring to God, because through the avatar Jesus, his essence is God. He said, "I and the Father are one." And Rama might as well have said, I and Vishnu are one, and Vishnu and the Absolute are one. So it comes to the same thing. There are levels in which, because in Islam, Allah is not incarnate. He is forever unmixed with the world he creates, and yet he's the essence of everything he creates. Everything in this world, its ultimate essence is Allah. So it's a different way of doing it, a different way of approaching it. But it does, when it comes to saying the name of God, the name of God is, for those who follow that way, is Ram, is Rama. That's when Gandhi was shot, and just before he died, that was his last word. He said, Hey Ram.
To me, Ram, and correct me if I'm wrong, is something of a tragic figure like Orpheus, who descends into the netherworlds to bring back his lover, but at the end of the day loses her.
And I wish I knew better than that. I just know that he fought the demon Ravana for her, to recover her. And
I could be wrong, but my recollection is that he questions her. He says, "Were you faithful to me during the time when you were in captivity by Ravana?" And she says something to the effect, "I will prove that I was faithful because to show you how faithful I was, the earth will now swallow me up." And it does, and she disappears again. So very similar to the story of Orpheus, who returns from the underworld.
I think the Greeks are inheritors of India. I'm not kidding. I mean, so many different things which are just absolutely integrated into Hindu worldview appear in Greece as different philosophical schools which are at odds with each other. As if, sages, we know that sages went from Greece to India to try to find out what wisdom we have, where did it come from? They knew it didn't come from them. It must have come from the Egyptians or from India. I think India is the answer more than anything else.
Well, there's certainly this idea of the Aryan culture moving into India and coming from somewhere, I think, to the west.
Well, or from Central Asia. How far to the west it came, I don't know, but it came down from Central Asia.
And I suspect went into Greece as well. After all, there are linguistic similarities.
Oh, yeah. The Romance languages could be called the Sanskrit-based languages in a larger sense. Latin was one of the branches of that. We imagine there's such a thing as Proto-Indo-European. Well, maybe, but they're all branches of the same thing. So anyway, that's what the Indians say, and but not forgetting the human form. It's like, so much of transhumanism and artificial intelligence has to do with forgetting what a human being is. Just forget completely. Wasn't I an animal or a robot or a machine all along? I guess that's what I was. So what the hell? Machines can be turned off if they don't work, and they can be re-engineered to be something else. pirated for their parts and all of this. And we don't know what a human being is.
Well, when you use the term the human form, what are you referring to exactly? Is it the human body or the human mind?
It's the total human form, body, soul, and spirit. That's and the thing is, the world, according to the doctrine that the human being is the microcosm of the macrocosm, the state of the world reflects the state of the human soul. We can see that clearer now than ever. The state of the human soul, just, you can see something go wrong spiritually or psychologically or socially in the human collective. And then, the manifestations in the outer world are almost immediate these days. Something goes wrong, and then, the error spreads through everything and becomes material conditions that we have to face.
When you suggest that we need to embrace our humanity, are you also suggesting that we have to have a sense of appreciation for all of the problems we're causing?
We are causing those problems because we've forgotten ourselves. Let me see. I think we're getting to where I could read one of those meditations because we're talking about it. Because it's the last one here. Yeah, let me see. This is a little bit long, but it's not too long. And it's called, let's see. Yeah, In Defense of Humanity. So this is sort of the answer to what you're asking. So it says, the sorrows of today's humanity are not fundamentally based on the many disasters that face us, or even on the understanding that most of these disasters are of our own making, so that many of them are actually the dark result of our highest ideals, now finally displaying their unintended consequences. No, the sorrows of humanity are based on the fact that we have collectively lost ourselves, lost faith in ourselves. We're disgusted with ourselves, actively despise ourselves. And feelings like this have led so many of us to actually seek out what is most despicable, what is most disgusting, as if we could hide from degradation in degradation itself, hide from shame in shame. This diagnosis does not apply, of course, to the totality of the human race, and there's certainly a great countercurrent to this collective degeneration of the human form, a renewal of humanity's highest spiritual aspirations that keeps pouring in from some invisible source, even in this darkest of times, a source upon whose true name, however, we cannot seem to agree. And yet it is undeniably there. But if we name it wrongly, then even this great outpouring of spirit may be lost to us because we lack a conceptual vessel clear and stable enough to contain it. The name of this vessel is humanity, what William Blake called the human form divine, the human face of God that lives in eternity and yet is always pouring itself into time and change and becoming. As Blake said in his Auguries of Innocence, God appears and God is light to those poor souls who dwell in night, but does a human form display to those who dwell in realms of day. But can we still accept this concept in times like these, in times when humanity to so many of us is at best a quaint nostalgic memory, and at worst an oppressive set of limitations and boundaries that we long to escape, because the idea of a transcendent truth appearing in a human form is becoming alien to us, just as we are becoming alien to ourselves. We imagine the animal spirits of the shamans, the great plant powers like ayahuasca, the UFO aliens themselves as the plausible and proper channels for the arrival of the higher truths. if not those techno-elves that Terence McKenna and many others have seen on DMT, which I take to be symbolic images of the human nervous system itself when alienated from the realized divinity of the human soul, seeing that the brain without the soul must appear more and more in the guise of an exquisitely sophisticated machine. This is what opens the door to transhumanism and the literal worship of artificial intelligence, which represents the final deconstruction of and requiem for the human race. And this is as it should be, say the proponents of mass soul suicide. No more will we be human, all too human, but something greater and freer and colder, something more powerful and more terrifying. No longer will the order of existence terrify us. Now we will terrify it and bend it to our will. And this might actually be to some an attractive result, except for the nagging question, who exactly will this triumphant we be? Certainly not the humans, the ones we have always recognized ourselves as being. We, the humans, are precisely the ones who will not triumph. We will be ground underfoot, negated, pulverized, obsolescent, irrelevant, forgotten. In the face of this massive threat, I believe that it is necessary to speak for humanity again. But since humanity is what we are, with no possibility of our ever being anything else, but where to begin? Ibn al-Arabi, the greatest Sufi sheikh, taught that human knowledge is higher than jinnish knowledge. The truths of God that come to us through human channels such as saints and prophets and avatars, can reach and alchemize our essential and integral humanity. But the truths that come from non-human sources, though through channelers and spirit mediums and alien abductions, even though these too may speak of God, can only come to us if we agree to become dehumanized in the process so as to meet them halfway. This is what the human-alien hybridization project, for example, is all about. The higher transcendental truths will come to us, even through channels like this, because we can't exist without them, but they will come at the expense of our full humanity. In order to know what the jinn know, we will be required to become uncanny, elven, half-jinnified ourselves, to allow ourselves to be turned into what are traditionally called changelings. Knowledge we will gain, certainly, and along with knowledge, power. What we will lose in the process, however, is love. And knowledge without love, just like power with nothing human to achieve or protect through use of that power, is nothing less than hell, a heartless, technological hell that will ultimately make us wish that we had never been born. The greatest booby prize of all, we had thought of love as weak, or, at best, as a kind of recreational reality like a summer vacation in a quaint mountain village from which we might nostalgically survey the rich panorama of the human past before returning to our post on the front lines of the great war for the future, the battle to eliminate the last vestiges of the human form in the name of something greater. But if war is the prime metaphor for the human struggle in these times, then I must openly declare that I have joined the ranks of the opposing forces, the side of the defenders of the human form. But where are these forces to be found? Who are their leaders? Where are their headquarters? How can their recruiters be contacted? Where do we sign up? The preservers and guarantors of the integrity of the human form are the great revealed religions and the primordial tradition from which the material for them was inherited on the horizontal axis of time, just as their forms descended along the vertical axis from the Word, the creative act of God in eternity. Hinduism speaks of the figure of Manu, or of some particular Manu, as the principle of a given manvantara, or cycle of manifestation, as if time itself were the long body of a primordial man, the working out of his or her possibilities in sequential order rather than synthetic form. Manu appears to be the ultimate origin of the English word man, which is also related to the Sanskrit manas, mind. The Buddhists speak of the human state hard to attain, the only form of samsaric existence, according to some accounts, from which perfect total enlightenment can be gained. Islam declares that it is humanity alone, not the heavens, the earth, and the hills, who possess the amana, the trust, thus making us Allah's Khalifa or vice-regent, his delegated eye, through which he surveys and orders terrestrial existence. And in the Christian universe, the second person of the Blessed Trinity, the Logos, incarnates not as a tree or a star or an animal or a robot, but as man, as a man, which is why Jesus Christ called himself the Son of Man. Even in those traditions where shamanism remains dominant, such as that of the Plains Indians, though the animal powers are placed at the four cardinal points of the medicine wheel, it is humanity who occupies the center. The spirits of the animal species assume a quasi-angelic status in the Native American universe, but while in the unseen world they are the powers of the Great Spirit, in this earthly world they are the powers of man. Likewise, in the world of mythology, which is largely made up of the remnants of various archaic religious conceptions, as well as of certain esoteric interpretations of the major divine revelations, the concept of the primordial man also appears, usually paired with a traditional notion of humanity as the microcosm of the macrocosm. The universe in miniature appearing in synthetic form, just as the vast universe we see around us is humanity in dispersed and multidimensional form. In Norse mythology, the giant Ymir is butchered to create all the forms of nature. His blood becomes the rivers, his bones the mountains, etc. A similar function is performed in Zoroastrianism by Gaiomar, the first man, while in the symbolic system of William Blake, the epitome of cosmic manifestation is symbolized by the giant Albion, as he says in his poem Jerusalem, "Man anciently contained in his mighty limbs all things in heaven and earth, but now the starry heavens are fled from the mighty limbs of Albion." This was Blake's rendition of the Kabbalistic doctrine of the Adam Kadmon, who is the synthesis of all the Sephirot, or manifested divine hypostases that constitute the tree of life. In the archaic Greek tradition as well, the primordial man appears as Orpheus, whose function is to mediate between the celestial or Apollonian powers above and the chthonic or Dionysian powers below. Just as, according to the Aristotelian hylomorphic theory, forma and materia are united and synthesized as the substantial forms of real existing things. And this correspondence between microcosm and macrocosm, between humanity and the universe, appears in modern cosmological theory as well as the anthropic principle, which holds that the universe is meticulously designed and fine-tuned so as to let life and ultimately human life emerge, the one kind of life that could conceive of the universe as an ordered cosmos and so generate an anthropic principle in the first place. Nor can anyone deny that the totality of the measurements we have made of the universe around us, as well as the entirety of the concepts we have generated to organize and make sense of the resultant data, are inevitably conditioned by the fact that the one performing the measurements and generating the theories is precisely humanity. Thus, as Blake expressed it in so many places, especially at the end of his great unfinished epic, The Four Zoas, the trees, the rocks, the hills, the oceans, the animals, the sun, and the stars are all human forms in essence. And for us, they can never be anything else because they are seen and formed by the divine imagination operating through the eye of man. And the strange thing is, we all used to know this without ever being taught it. We knew instinctively, naturally, that we were human beings, the bearers of the image of God, the imago Dei, and consequently that we possessed a fundamental human dignity as our inalienable right. We knew this by the very fact that we were it, though our various religious traditions fulfill the vital function of reminding us of this intrinsic and obvious fact and preventing us from forgetting it. But now that these traditions are in their decadence, we actually have forgotten it, or at least enough of us have forgotten it, those most severely affected by scientism, atheism, and materialism, for human society to now be in the process of reforming itself along non-human lines. As the Holy Quran puts it, they forgot Allah, and so Allah caused them to forget themselves. We call this transhumanism, but what it actually is subhumanism, as I expressed it in a poem I wrote as many as 50 years ago. We have given worms and flies the human voice, and so filled our bodies with worms and flies. And all the sophisticated metaphysical, theological, esoteric, and mythological lore and understanding in the world can never restore to us what we have lost through the kind of alienation from our own true essence that has made us forget what a human being is, even though we actually are human beings and can never be anything else. Nothing short of a radical apocalypse, a great purification day, speaking in Native American terms, could restore to us on a collective basis this abandoned knowledge. The ghosts, the spirits, the cryptids, the UFO aliens that we are now collectively turning to in order to fill the void left by the death of God can never do this for us, precisely because each of these represents a specific departure from the human form, along one or another vector of extremity or caricature or degeneration or loss. The Sasquatch toward the subhuman orders of nature, the ghosts toward the separation of spirit from flesh, the aliens toward the transhuman deconstruction of humanity, since they are nothing less than the spirits of alienation, the very archetypes and emissaries of the great transhumanist self-betrayal. Yet, in the heart of every divine revelation, as in the depths of the human heart, the primordial humanity that the Muslims call the fitra still remains intact and inviolate, just as it was originally conceived and is eternally conceived in all its primeval perfection in the mind of God. If we have faith in this, if we know this existentially, whether or not we can make conceptually explicit to ourselves exactly how we know it, then we can remember God. And if we remember God, he will cause us to remember ourselves. In the great war between the human form and all the infernal subhuman forces that menace it, those powers of terror and seduction and forgetfulness and despair, this is the primary weapon, the central strategy, and the front line of battle. And as for the battle cry, "Stay human," might well suffice. It is short, it is succinct, and it hits the nail on the head.
Charles, that was magnificent, but it does raise a question to me. Stay human seems to be a very different goal for humanity than, for example, there is no refuge from Allah but within Allah.
I don't see the difference. Because, Allah has made us in this form. And how can we take refuge in Allah if we abandon the form in which he has made us? We have no way to do that.
Well put. And I don't think I have any further questions or can add anything else to that magnificent conclusion of your essay, Charles.
But, all that's appearing in the world now in terms of war, it was all going on in the collective human soul all along. This is just the outer manifestation of what's been going on within us for quite a while, and finally it boils over. But this is all coming from within us, within the collective soul. Because, having forgotten ourselves, the thing is, in apocalypse, which means revelation, the veils are removed one by one. And the reality of God is pressing in upon us at every point. Get ready, because ready or not, here comes the presence of God, the very face of God. And it's not a time where the face of God is distant and under many veils, and we have to struggle with ourselves and do heroic asceticism in order to see it. It's coming, and very many of us don't want it, because it's very formidable, because it is a face of judgment, because it's a face of love. When love is unveiled in its nakedness, what you have is intrinsic to love, is a judgment against everything that has betrayed love. Love cannot live without that judgment. Love is not weak. Love is the full expression of absolute reality in every possible way. And whatever stands in the way of that expression will be mowed down and swept away. And this is what's happening. And so can we turn to that and say yes, and say whatever in me is not in line with love, is not in line with truth, let it be swept away. Let those forces within me be conquered. Man, so many of the Psalms, if you read them right, the enemy in the Psalms is the inner enemy, as well as the outer enemy. But it's more the inner enemy. Those things that stand against love in me, are going to burn. So at best, we should not hold on to them. Let them be swept away. Let the wind of the Spirit blow them away. And that's how these times can bring us to a more radical purification of soul than we ever could in easy times. In easy times, it's hard. You're not, why purify myself? Everything's good enough. It's plenty. It's great. It's doing great. I don't need, to look at the darkness in my soul, because everything is moving along swimmingly. But in times like this, everything that stands in the way of the presence of God just starts to become red hot, and she says, ouch, too hard to hold on to. There's a hadith where Prophet Muhammad said, in the latter days, holding on to true religion will be like trying to hold a burning coal in your hand. So it is difficult, the truth in times of universal deception and universal lying, where everybody lies just as a matter of course, and you feel if you're not lying and getting people to believe your lies, then you're losing, because everybody, of course, is lying to you too. So, and if you believe them, if they're able to fool you, but you're not able to fool them, then you lose. So you better keep lying better and better. And it's just, and it's phenomenal, to see how everything, especially things you see on the web, are just, that they have to lie. They have to lie. But I'm sorry, as it says in the Quran, truth has come and falsehood has passed away. Surely falsehood is ever liable to vanish, because lying and delusions, you think it's powerful. Oh, I fooled him again. I made a speech and I fooled him. They all believed me, so I'm getting ahead. Well, guess what? There's no basis to what you said. And when the moment of truth comes, your lies will have no substance at all, and people don't realize that until it's too late, especially successful liars. And a lot of successful liars now in the world, they think they're successful. So, just talking about how apocalyptic times can help us in our own spiritual journey, is through this kind of radical purification, because there's nowhere to hide.
Charles Upton, once again, it's been a real pleasure to be with you and to share your thoughts with the New Thinking Aloud audience.
Well, good. I was going to read one more thing.
I'd be very happy for you to do that.
Okay, and this is something I wrote. I started writing this like 50 years ago. This is a section of my epic poem, The Wars of Love. And, it's somehow, well, when I first was getting together with my wife, Jenny, just even before we were married, suddenly everything became war. Because when she came into my life, that's when I realized I couldn't go along with the world because, she was radically at odds with the world, not in a rebellious way, just in intrinsically not being part of this system. And so when I threw in my lot with her, suddenly, the system was now, I was now in the crosshairs of the system. Like I say, in the crosshairs of the Gnostic archons. So anyway, this is from The Wars of Love, and 50 years old. It says, in the cave of the heart shines a hot interior sun. Sometimes it is veiled by leaden clouds, sometimes by a mist of dull, tarnished gold. At times the clouds are a muddy olive color, at other times the color of dried blood. But beyond the veils of despair and complacency, of shapeless intoxication and grim spiritual will, a fine gold sun is roaring with knowledge over an incandescent ocean, heaving in mountains of divine energy, the tidal waves of the eons, passing as we watch them, but eternal in the core of radiance, before whose face we rise and pass like voices. Whatever word is heard in that light stands like a pillar between earth and sky. So now the violet fear and the white fear, now the full beast driven from the heart, rising in front of us and us knowing him. Open hell, seal not the door where evil dwells. Stir the banked coals, the immemorial anger, the mirror-bound suicides, lizards on a red cliff at dawn. They flex the sinews of their wings. They take delight in their own beings. I say all will be pressed into service. I say all will be required to fight. The passive, the coward, the innocent will be trampled down unless locked in single combat with Antichrist in mountain solitude and stillness. Invoke, therefore, the war in your marrow. Call on the fight you were born with, that enemy whose lie is cut and tooled precisely to cover your single truth. Pick targets. Each man is alone with all men in this night of war. The conglomerate form of death stands guard on each human door, solid to the bullet and the chisel, like those cliffs in the Sinai in which our skirmishers discovered still living the imprisoned forms of men. The sky is roofed with machines now, a guarded perimeter to block out the angelic orders. The earth is filled with the limbs of struggling giants locked apart in separate mirrors and cold branching corridors of time. They are powers of creation chained in elemental caverns when the human form was planted on earth. Because man, when he fell, needed ground under his feet, the bedrock of God. But we have forgotten God now, and the rock is unsteady. Our foundations crack like parchment, they heave and shift like water. The mechanical chatter of demons, the acid of shattered images are our gods and our protectors. The wasp and the locust advise us. The spider and the scorpion guard our sleep. Who knows this? Who has courage to worship? Who has the courage not to worship at the feet of his own destroyers? Friends, I know you. You are those scourged by what you see in the crackle and hiss of fire, the flowers in the rift of God. You have incontrovertible reason, proof to silence laughter. You are the face of the divine humanity driven to the margins and borders of the earth, weighted and crushed by the trust, till you release the burden of your heavy word to the pavement, to the center of the earth, if necessary, that the heart give up her dead. You walk through the cities of the grave and the high mountains with food and intelligence for your people. You open your throats to the messengers to give them a living voice. Saints take counsel beneath your ribs. You offer your bodies to be the purgatory of souls you will never know. You are those who in your hunger did not ask for food and so became storehouses, who in thirst did not cry for water and so became rivers, who in nakedness did not flinch under shame, but suffered it, rejecting the cloth of the world, and so became a city for all people where no one is refused, but only those who know how to place their foreheads on the dusty earth can enter. You live in that year when each man and woman picks up their whole cross and walks in the terrible sunrise down the burning road as the structure of consensus reality crashes all around us, torn free from the flesh of memory, stripped naked to mercy, gone beyond death. The scythe reaps, the seed heads fall, the harvest barn is hidden everywhere in the fire. And the wedding smoke rises, perfume of all love and murder, heroism, quiet, secret work in the caverns of the heart, pounding the stone doors of those sacrificial priests who desecrate the human form to build the regime of Antichrist. Gods of the New World Order, powers of frigid glamour and insane false hope and numb despair. Pour fire against their sanctuary, against the dragon, against the tower. Glyphs of destiny strung like nets through the charged structure of the thunderhead. Weave lightning into working knowledge, where the living truth sits mounted and armed in the region of the air, on the borders of the next world, now shining into this one, in dream and vision more solid than a rock in the hand, to overturn their altars those blissful devotees, worshippers of despair incarnate, to whom love is a torturing fire, at the precise point where their pain and loss are most deeply denied. In the mouth of their wisest wound, these words are engraved, white fire cut on black fire on the skeletal plasm of their nerves. And love is what we wish them. But how can they accept such a gift from the likes of us? How can they even know their need? They are inheritors of the whole world. We are nothing but inheritors of the earth. So that's from my book, The Wars of Love and Other Poems, which you can get on Amazon. And the other things I read are from the two books upcoming. One is Islam, Outer Form and Inner Meaning. And the other one is Metaphysics for Hard Times. So you can watch for those. They'll appear soon.
Thank you, Charles. Also, I want our viewers to know that in the description of this video, there will be a link to the GoFundMe page to help you with your battle, which has been ongoing now for well over a year, several years, I believe, your battle with cancer.
Yeah, I'm just, I'm keeping it at bay is all I know. So. Just the supplements that I'm using cost a lot.
Our thoughts for healing and for sustaining yourself are strong, because I want to have many more conversations with you, Charles.
Same here. Yeah, seems to be more to say.
Well, for now, thank you for being with me. And for those of you watching or listening, thank you for being with us, because you are the reason that we are here. New Thinking Aloud is presented by the California Institute for Human Science, a fully accredited university offering distant learning graduate degrees that focus on mind, body, and spirit. The topics that we cover here. We are particularly excited to announce new degrees emphasizing parapsychology and the paranormal. Visit their website at CIHS You can now download all 9 copies of the New Thinking Aloud magazine for free or order beautiful printed copies. Go to newthinkingaloud.org.
Book 4 in the New Thinking Aloud dialogue series is Charles T. Tart, 70 Years of Exploring Consciousness and Parapsychology, now available on Amazon.
For early access to our videos and live stream events, sign up for our free weekly newsletter at newthinkingaloud.org.